Listen to the full podcast over on Spotify. The link is in the description down below.
20 odd years old, whatever it is.
Old on the sleeping giant.
Exactly. They've been sleeping so long, I think they're comatose, to be honest with you.
They're just biding their time. They're waiting. One day they're going to come back.
It's true. But obviously now, living here in Canada, and obviously the Canadian Premier League started just in 2018, so it's like brand new. It's nice to have a local team to support. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just gesticulating over there. I have my Halifax Wanderers flag on the wall. But that's become, and I think also part of it through Football Manager as well. I have to say, especially because I don't get a lot of like Premier League coverage. I mean, in the UK, you walk into Tesco's, you look at the newspapers, everything's football, football, football. You put on the TV, football, football, football. I'm not getting any of that coverage here in Canada. Hockey, coming
I think it's a national sport of Canada, isn't it? Hockey, I would imagine.
It is. Yeah, it is, and that's fine. But obviously, I'm not keeping up. So most of my knowledge of football tends to come through Football Manager. Believe it or not, who's in the Oldham squad this time? Oh, that guy. Okay,
right. It's like, who's that one? The kid has popped up. All right, okay. Then you see him like 3 years later and go, oh well, I spotted him a few years ago. He was in the Oldham athletic team of 2013. Right. I'm just saying.
It's true. So, so as a result, playing Halifax, on the save, I have now become, I think, a much more firmer Halifax Wanderers supporter. You know what I mean? Then obviously I couldn't get to see them this past season because they had a special competition because of COVID. They had the Island Games, which was there's an island, the PEI, Prince Edward Island. Basically, all of the Canadian Premier League teams gathered there and played like a competition. It was like a cut down version, I guess. So they did like play everybody, and then there were quite a two-legged final kind of thing, which Halifax actually got to the final, lost out in the final in real life. But they did really well because they finished bottom in the inaugural Canadian Premier League in 2018. So it's massive improvement for them for this season. And obviously this next season coming up, again, hopefully, because it is in game a full season, but we don't know if it will be in real life. But hopefully they'll get to do things properly. But one thing I will talk about actually, and on the FM front as well, is obviously there are certain rules and stuff within the Canadian Premier League, as there are in MLS, as there are and so on.
I think MLS. I think we could be here for about 3 hours talking about it.
Exactly. With the Canadian side, it's not too bad. You have a divisional wage budget, meaning each team cannot have players registered over $19,500. I think it is, like combined wage thing, which is a pain in the ass to keep under. But once you're used to it, it's not too bad. But the one thing that I'm sort of noticing about it is that I don't think that number's ever going to change. I think that number is fixed. Now, bear in mind, I'm only 4 seasons in. We have already improved the reputation of the Canadian Premier League in terms of its ranking versus, in terms of the North American side of things, Mexico were top, MLS are second, and we're like third or fourth, something like that. The Canadian Premier League. I think that's right anyway, where it stands now. And like I say, we've moved up a few places and all the rest of it, but that number hasn't changed. And obviously, the way that I set up this save was that it was going to be, last the entirety of the FM21 life, if you know what I mean, and turn it into a proper development save. But I wanted to see if it was possible to raise the profile of the Canadian Premier League in game high enough to be higher than, say, the MLS. And it's definitely possible from a gameplay point of view, but if that number never changes, I don't know if I can, be bigger than the MLS while we're still only limited to spending that amount of money.
That's going to be quite difficult, I imagine, because it's going to be struggling to bring in the good players you're going to need because, like you say, the league reputation, I'm sure you could probably get that improved, but it's going to be when you get into those continental competitions where you're going up against the MLS, who's I'm sure would have a larger budget than the Canadian Premier League. And that's, I think, where the kind of the pressure point is going to be to try and improve if you're stuck to like $19,000 a year, however much it is.
I mean, in terms of the rule itself, it makes perfect sense for a brand new league. Halifax are a small city compared to, Toronto and Manitoba, whatever else, a lot of the other Canadian teams. I mean, can't remember if I think it's Valor FC have got a huge stadium, for example, which they struggle to fill. They're not getting like more than 10% in it. Halifax, conversely, have a pop-up stadium. We don't actually have a full-on stadium at the moment. The Wanderers Grounds is a multi-use sports ground which gets like the lacrosse team play there and some other people, but like I say, it's not a fixed proper stadium. So again, can't have the crowd say that Valor can. But again, we don't have the population here. But when you consider how far apart, all of the Canadian cities are and all the Canadian teams are, you're not going to get any travelling fans either. So you're pretty much relying on local money and local input. So where you're a smaller team in a smaller place like Halifax, having that limit means you're always going to be able to compete theoretically at the same level as everybody else in that division.
Listen to the full podcast over on Spotify. The link is in the description down below.